The grand ballroom of the Carter estate was alive with laughter and the clinking of crystal glasses. Chandelier crystals sparkled like stars as the light danced over the wealthy elite gathered to celebrate Ethan Carter's latest business triumph. Ethan, a tall man with sharp features and an air of confidence that bordered on arrogance, stood at the center of it all, holding court with a group of his closest friends. The scent of expensive cologne mingled with the aroma of gourmet hors d'oeuvres, creating an atmosphere that was both intoxicating and suffocating. "Ethan, my man, you've outdone yourself again," said Derek, a stocky man with a booming voice. He slapped Ethan on the back, nearly spilling his drink. "That merger with Hart Industries? Pure genius. You're practically a legend in this town." "Legend?" Ethan laughed, his blue eyes glinting with pride. "I'm not just a legend. I'm a god in the business world. But hey, it's all in a day's work." His friends chuckled, feeding off his ego as they exchanged knowing glances, relishing in the idea that they were part of his orbit. "Speaking of legends," chimed in Lisa, a striking blonde with a penchant for drama. "What's next for you, Ethan? You've conquered the business scene. Are you going to take on the dating world next?" There was a playful glint in her eyes, and the other friends leaned in, intrigued. Ethan smirked, the corners of his mouth twitching upward. "Dating? Please, I have my pick of the most beautiful women in the city. They practically throw themselves at me." His voice dripped with arrogance, and he raised his glass, taking a sip of the expensive bourbon. "Sure, but what about the challenge?" Derek said, a mischievous grin spreading across his face. "I dare you to marry the next woman who walks through that door. But here's the twist. She can't be a model or even close to what society considers beautiful. You know, someone who doesn't fit that perfect mold." Ethan's laughter echoed through the room, a sound both incredulous and mocking. "You're kidding, right? You think I can't attract a woman based on my charm and wealth alone?" His friends exchanged glances, the challenge igniting a spark of competition. "Come on, Ethan, it would be hilarious, and you'll prove us wrong." "How hard could it be? You're Ethan Carter," Lisa insisted, her eyes lighting up with amusement. "You can charm anyone." If you're enjoying this video and want to see more content like this, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and activate the bell. That way, you won't miss any of our updates. Your support helps us bring you the best content possible. Continuing, feeling a mix of insulted pride and the thrill of the challenge, Ethan leaned back, his brow furrowing as he considered the proposition. "All right, I'll do it," he said, his voice steady and resolved. "But when I win, you all owe me a night out on the town. And I mean a serious night out. Deal?" Derek exclaimed, shaking Ethan's hand with enthusiasm. The rest of the group erupted in cheers, the atmosphere electric with anticipation. The challenge was set, and Ethan felt a rush of adrenaline. It was all a game, one he was determined to win. As the party continued, Ethan found himself glancing toward the entrance, curiosity piqued. Who would be the woman to walk through that door? Would she be plain, awkward, or simply unremarkable? The idea of marrying someone society deemed unattractive seemed absurd, but part of him relished the thought of proving his friends wrong. The evening dragged on, the laughter and clinking glasses blurring together, but Ethan felt a sense of purpose brewing beneath his bravado. He would find this woman, marry her, and show everyone that beauty was subjective. It was a game, and he was the master player. The next day, the sun spilled through the windows of Ethan's penthouse, casting warm rays across the sleek furniture and modern art that adorned the walls. He was seated at his kitchen island, sipping coffee and scrolling through his phone when a sudden thought struck him. The bet. Ethan chuckled to himself, shaking his head at the absurdity of it all. The idea of marrying someone who didn't fit into the mold was laughable. He envisioned a woman with frizzy hair, thick glasses, and a wardrobe that seemed to come from a thrift store. It would be easy to win this bet. He could charm anyone, after all. With a newfound determination, Ethan decided he would head to the local coffee shop, a quaint little place that he often passed but never entered. He imagined that was where he would find his unattractive bride. With his tailored suit and polished shoes, He'd stroll in and find the perfect woman for his plan. As he walked into the coffee shop, the scent of freshly ground beans enveloped him, mingling with the sweet aroma of pastries. The walls were adorned with rustic decorations, and the soft chatter of patrons created a warm atmosphere that contrasted sharply with his usual high society haunts. Ethan approached the counter and noticed the barista, a woman with curly brown hair pulled into a loose bun. Her cheeks flushed as she focused on the cash register. She wore a simple black t-shirt and an apron, and while she wasn't unattractive, there was an air of anonymity about her that seemed to suit his challenge perfectly. I'll have a cappuccino," he said, trying to sound casual. The barista looked up, her green eyes meeting his, and a hint of surprise flickered across her face. "Sure thing. Coming right up." She busied herself with the machine, steam rising and the sound of grinding coffee beans filling the air. Ethan leaned against the counter, watching her work with a mix of intrigue and impatience. "So, what's your name?" he asked, breaking the silence. "Emily," she replied, glancing at him with a shy smile. "And you are?" "Ethan Carter," he said, his voice dripping with confidence. "You know, the business guy from Carter Enterprises?" Emily's smile faltered for a moment, her eyes narrowing as she processed his name. "Oh, right. I've heard of you. You're quite prominent around here." "Prominent? That's one way to put it," he replied, leaning in slightly. "I'm more of a legend, you know." Emily raised an eyebrow, a hint of skepticism in her expression. "Legends are often just stories, aren't they?" Ethan's smirk faltered, caught off guard by her honesty. "Touché. But I assure you, I'm quite real." He watched as she poured the frothy milk into the cup, her movements graceful despite the bustling environment. The awkwardness hung between them like a veil, and Ethan felt an unexpected intrigue building. This wasn't the reaction he was used to. Most women fawned over him, eager to engage. But Emily seemed unfazed, focused on her job instead. "Do you come here often?" he asked, attempting to steer the conversation back to safer waters. "Only when I'm working," she replied, handing him the cappuccino with a slight smile. "But it's a good place. The coffee is great, and the atmosphere is nice, right?" he said, taking a sip of the drink. It was surprisingly good, and he couldn't help but admire her dedication. "Maybe I'll see you around then, Emily." "Maybe," she said, her tone neutral as she turned to help the next customer. Ethan felt a strange sensation as he stepped away from the counter, a mix of intrigue and frustration swirling within him. Emily Parker was not what he expected, and as he left the cafe, he found himself contemplating the challenge ahead. This bet was supposed to be easy, but something about Emily lingered in his mind, pulling at him with an unexpected force. With a determined glint in his eyes, Ethan Carter walked out of the coffee shop, ready to face whatever came next. Little did he know that the path ahead would challenge everything he believed about beauty, love, and himself. Ethan Carter stood outside the quaint little coffee shop, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee wafting through the open door. He felt a mix of anticipation and uncertainty. Today, he had resolved to ask Emily Parker out on a date, and despite his bravado, a part of him was apprehensive. The challenge he had accepted loomed over him like a dark cloud, but he pushed those thoughts aside, focusing instead on the woman who had intrigued him since their first encounter. As he stepped inside, the bell above the door chimed, announcing his arrival. The shop was bustling with activity, patrons seated at small, rustic tables, engaged in quiet conversation, punctuated by the sound of the espresso machine hissing. Ethan spotted Emily behind the counter, her hands deftly working as she prepared drinks. There was a warmth in her smile that he found disarming, and he felt an unexpected flutter in his chest. "Hey, Ethan," Emily exclaimed, her eyes lighting up as she noticed him. "What can I get for you today?" "Just a black coffee, please," he replied, trying to keep his tone casual despite the nerves gnawing at him. "I was actually hoping to talk to you about something." "Sure. What's on your mind?" she asked, pouring the steaming liquid into a cup. Ethan leaned against the counter, his heart racing. "I was wondering if you'd like to go out with me sometime. You know, just the two of us." He kept his expression neutral, hiding the ulterior motive behind his invitation. Emily paused, her brow furrowing slightly as she processed his words. "Are you serious?" she asked, a hint of disbelief lacing her tone. "Absolutely," he said, nodding vigorously. "I mean, I think you're really interesting, and I'd love to get to know you better." She regarded him for a moment, her blue eyes searching his face. "Okay," she replied slowly, a mixture of excitement and hesitation evident in her voice. "I'd like that." "Great. How about Friday evening?" he suggested, relief flooding through him at her acceptance. "Sounds good," she smiled, her cheeks flushing slightly. "Just let me know where to meet." Ethan felt a surge of triumph as he left the coffee shop, the weight of the bet momentarily forgotten. However, as the days passed, he found himself grappling with conflicting emotions. He had not anticipated how genuine his interest in Emily would become. She was unlike anyone he had ever met, intelligent, witty, and refreshingly honest. Yet, there remained a flicker of arrogance within him, a nagging voice that reminded him of the wager he had made with his friends. Friday arrived, and Ethan found himself dressed in a crisp button-down shirt and tailored trousers, his usual air of confidence slightly shaken. He arrived at the restaurant, an upscale Italian place he frequented, fidgeting with the cufflinks on his sleeves. He had chosen it for its ambience, hoping to impress Emily, but now he questioned if it was the right choice. When Emily walked in, wearing a simple yet elegant dress that highlighted her natural beauty, Ethan felt his heart skip a beat. She looked radiant, her hair cascading in soft waves around her shoulders. He stood up, a smile spreading across his face. "Wow, you look amazing," he exclaimed, genuinely surprised by how stunning she appeared. "Thanks, Ethan," she said, a shy smile gracing her lips as she took her seat. "This place is beautiful." They settled into conversation, sharing stories and laughter over their meals. Ethan found himself captivated by Emily's insights on life, her passion for art, and her dreams for the future. He felt a connection growing between them, one that transcended the superficial judgments he had once harbored. But as the evening progressed, a slip of his tongue revealed the underlying arrogance he had yet to shake off. "You know," he said, leaning back in his chair, "it's refreshing to be with someone who doesn't care about fitting the mold. Most people these days are obsessed with appearances." Emily's smile faltered, and a shadow crossed her face. "What do you mean by that?" she asked, her tone cautious. Ethan, realizing his mistake, scrambled to clarify. "I just meant that you have a unique beauty," he stammered, but the damage was done. The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. Emily's expression shifted, her eyes dimming. "Unique?" she echoed, her voice barely above a whisper. "Is that what you really think?" Ethan felt a sinking feeling in his stomach. "I didn't mean it like that," he rushed to explain. I think I understand," she interrupted, her voice steady but hurt. "You're saying that I'm not like the women you usually date, right? That I'm different." "No, Emily, that's not it," he insisted, leaning forward, desperate to make her see his true intentions. "I think you're wonderful, but Emily was already shaking her head. "You know, I thought this was a genuine date, Ethan. But now I'm starting to feel like it's just a game for you." Ethan's heart sank as he watched her withdraw, her walls going up in an instant. "That's not true. I really do like you," he said earnestly, but the words felt inadequate in the face of her disappointment. "I need to go," she said, her voice firm as she stood up. "Thank you for dinner, but I think I should head home." Ethan watched her walk away, his heart pounding in his chest. The realization hit him like a ton of bricks. He had let his arrogance seep through, and in doing so, he had jeopardized something that had begun to feel real and meaningful. As he sat alone at the table, the remnants of their meal untouched, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling of regret that settled over him. He had entered this date with the intention of proving a point to his friends, but he had found something deeper within himself, a connection with Emily that he had never expected. Now, as she left, he felt a profound sense of loss, realizing that he had not only hurt her, but had also betrayed his own growing feelings. He stared out the window, watching as the rain began to fall, each drop echoing the turmoil within him. Ethan knew he had to confront his motivations before it was too late, but he also feared that he might have already lost the chance to truly know Emily. Ethan Carter sat in the dim light of his lavish penthouse, the cityscape sprawling beneath him like a glittering carpet of opportunity. He leaned back on his plush leather sofa, staring out at the skyline, but his mind was far from the view. It was consumed with thoughts of Emily Parker. It had been a few weeks since their awkward first date, and he found himself reflecting on her more than he ever anticipated. He had entered this arrangement with a sense of superiority, believing he would easily win the bet with his friends. But as he replayed their conversations in his mind, he couldn't help but acknowledge the connection that had begun to form between them. Emily was smart, witty, and refreshingly genuine, qualities that shone through her insecurities. In a fit of frustration, he slammed a glass of bourbon down on the table, sending a ripple through the amber liquid. "What the hell am I doing?" he muttered to himself. A part of him was still clinging to the arrogance that had defined him for so long, yet another part was slowly awakening to a deeper understanding of beauty, one that transcended the superficial standards he had once held dear. The next day, Ethan found himself at the coffee shop where Emily worked. He hadn't planned to go there, but something compelled him to see her. As he stepped inside, the rich aroma of freshly brewed coffee enveloped him, and he spotted Emily behind the counter, her hair pulled back in a messy bun, wearing an apron splattered with coffee stains. She looked up, her face brightening with a smile that made his heart skip a beat. "Hey, Ethan, what can I get for you today?" she asked, her voice warm and inviting. "Just a black coffee, please," he replied, trying to keep his tone casual. "How's your day going?" "Busy as usual," she said with a laugh, pouring the hot liquid into a cup. "But it's going well. I'm learning to make lattes, so that's fun." "Lattes, huh? I'll have to come back for one of those," he replied, genuinely intrigued. He leaned against the counter, watching her as she expertly frothed the milk. "You know, you really have a talent for this. I mean, not everyone can make coffee look that good." Emily glanced up at him, a hint of surprise in her eyes. "Really? Thanks. I've always loved making coffee. It's like an art form, you know?" Ethan nodded, feeling a warmth in his chest. "You're right. It's all about the details." As they talked, Ethan found himself captivated by her passion and enthusiasm. Emily spoke animatedly about her dreams, her aspirations, and the little things that brought her joy, like the way the light filtered through the leaves in the park or the thrill of a good book. He was struck by how different this experience was from his interactions with other women, those who often seemed more concerned with appearances than substance. However, as the conversation deepened, Ethan's thoughts drifted back to his friends and their expectations. He could picture their smug faces, their taunts echoing in his mind. They would expect him to keep this facade up, to prove that he could win the bet without actually caring about Emily. But what if he did care? What if this was more than just a game? Later that evening, Ethan met up with his friends for drinks at a high-end bar. The atmosphere was lively, laughter and clinking glasses surrounding them. It should have been a comforting environment, but as soon as he sat down, he felt the weight of their expectations pressing down on him. "Hey man, how's the bet going?" one of his friends, Chris, asked, a smirk playing on his lips. "You still with that? What was her name? Emily?" "Yeah, Emily," Ethan replied, trying to keep his tone light. "We're getting to know each other." "Getting to know each other?" Another friend chimed in, chuckling. "Is that code for you're trying to make her more presentable or something?" Ethan clenched his jaw, irritation bubbling beneath the surface. "No, it's not like that. She's a great person." "Sure, buddy. Just remember you're doing this for the bet, right?" Chris said, raising an eyebrow. "Don't get too attached." Ethan forced a laugh, but inside, he felt a knot tightening in his stomach. He had always prided himself on his ability to manipulate situations to his advantage, but now he found himself caught in a web of confusion. The more he got to know Emily, the more he felt the disconnect between his friend's shallow expectations and his evolving feelings. That night, Ethan lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the voices of his friends echoing in his mind. He tossed and turned, the internal battle raging within him. On one hand, he didn't want to let anyone down. On the other hand, he was beginning to realize that he was the one who needed to change. His perceptions, his values, and perhaps even the way he viewed love. The next day, he made a decision. He would invite Emily out for dinner, but this time it would be different. He wanted to show her that he valued her for who she was, not just as a pawn in a bet. He picked up his phone, hesitating for a moment before sending her a text. "Hey Emily, how about dinner tonight? Just us?" A few moments later, his phone buzzed with her response. "Sure, sounds great. Where do you want to go?" Ethan smiled, feeling a rush of anticipation. "How about that Italian place downtown? I've heard it's amazing. Perfect. I love Italian food," she replied, and he could almost hear her excitement through the screen. As the evening approached, Ethan dressed carefully, choosing a crisp white shirt that accentuated his physique. He looked in the mirror, adjusting his collar, but his reflection felt foreign to him. The confident businessman was still there, but behind the facade, a new Ethan was emerging. One who was willing to embrace vulnerability and honesty. At the restaurant, the ambience was intimate, with soft music playing in the background. Ethan arrived early, pacing nervously as he waited for Emily. When she walked through the door, looking effortlessly beautiful in a simple black dress, his heart raced. She spotted him and her face lit up, making him forget all the worries that had plagued him. "Hi, Ethan. Sorry I'm a little late," she said, her cheeks flushed with excitement. "No worries. You look amazing," he replied genuinely. They settled into their seats, and as they shared a bottle of wine, the conversation flowed easily. They talked about their childhoods, their dreams, and what they wanted out of life. Ethan found himself laughing more than he had in years, drawn in by Emily's infectious laughter and keen insights. But as the night wore on, he could sense a shift in the atmosphere. Emily's laughter began to falter, and he noticed a flicker of concern cross her face. "What's wrong?" Ethan asked, leaning in closer. She hesitated, biting her lip. I sense that something is bothering you. Are you okay?" Ethan took a deep breath, knowing this was the moment he had to confront the truth. "I am, but it's complicated." "Complicated how?" she pressed, her eyes searching his face. "I never meant for this to become so personal. I accepted a bet from my friends to prove that I could marry someone who wasn't traditionally attractive," he admitted, his heart pounding. "But the more I've gotten to know you, the more I realize how wrong I was." Emily's expression fell, her eyes widening in shock. "You were just using me as a bet?" "No, I didn't think it would matter at first. But it does. I care about you, Emily. You've changed my perspective on so many things," he rushed to explain, desperation creeping into his voice. Tears welled in her eyes, and she shook her head slowly. "I can't believe this. I thought you liked me for who I am, not because of some stupid bet. I do like you. I really do," Ethan pleaded, feeling the weight of her disappointment pressing down on him. "Please, just let me explain." But she stood up, her chair scraping against the floor. "I can't do this," she said, her voice breaking. "I need to go." Ethan watched helplessly as she turned away, the realization of what he had done crashing over him like a wave. He had risked everything for a moment of honesty, and now he had lost her. The weight of betrayal hung heavy in the air, and for the first time, Ethan felt the full force of his arrogance crashing down around him. "Emily, wait," he called after her, but she walked out of the restaurant, leaving him alone in the dim light, surrounded by the remnants of a night that had begun with hope but ended in heartbreak. Ethan Carter stood alone in his penthouse, the city lights flickering outside like distant stars. His heart felt heavy, a mix of regret and longing washing over him. He had thought he was invincible, a master of his own fate, but the truth was different. He had lost Emily Parker, a remarkable woman who had captured his heart in ways he never thought possible. The bet that had seemed like a trivial challenge had transformed into the biggest mistake of his life. He remembered the last conversation they had, her eyes filled with hurt and betrayal as she demanded the truth. When he had finally admitted to the bet, her expression had crumbled, and she had walked out, leaving him with nothing but the echo of her footsteps. Now, each day without her felt like a never-ending punishment, a reminder of his arrogance and the cruel game he had played. He had believed he was merely proving a point to his friends, but in doing so, he had shattered the one connection that had begun to mean so much to him. "Ethan, you've really messed this one up," he muttered to himself, pacing the room. The lavish surroundings, filled with expensive art and designer furniture, felt hollow. The very things he had once taken pride in now mocked him. His phone buzzed on the table, a text from one of his friends, a reminder of the group's plans for the weekend. He ignored it, unable to face their smug comments about his failure. Days turned into weeks, and Ethan found himself haunted by memories of Emily. He recalled the way her laughter lit up the room, how her intelligence sparked engaging conversations that challenged him. He thought of their shared moments, the way she had looked at him with warmth and acceptance, despite his flaws. The realization hit him like a cold splash of water. He had fallen for her, deeply, completely, and now he had pushed her away. Meanwhile, Emily was taking steps to reclaim her life. She had joined a support group focused on body positivity and self-love, hoping to find solace amongst others who had faced similar struggles. The first meeting had been tentative. She had sat in a circle of unfamiliar faces, listening as others shared their stories of insecurity and triumph. As they spoke, she felt a flicker of hope ignite within her. She wasn't alone in her feelings, and perhaps there was a way to rebuild her shattered self-esteem. "Hi, I'm Emily," she had said softly during her turn, her voice trembling slightly. "I've always struggled with my weight and how I see myself. I thought I was finally getting somewhere with someone. But then, well, it didn't turn out how I hoped." Tears had pricked at her eyes, but she blinked them away, determined not to let the past define her. "Thank you for sharing, Emily," one of the women had responded, her voice gentle. "It's not easy to open up, and it sounds like you've been through a lot. Remember, your worth isn't determined by someone else's opinion of you." The support and encouragement from the group had wrapped around her like a warm blanket, slowly easing the ache in her heart. With each meeting, Emily began to regain her confidence. She started to embrace her body, attending yoga classes and experimenting with new styles that made her feel good. She discovered the joy of cooking healthy meals, exploring flavors and ingredients that nourished her body and spirit. Friends began to notice the change, commenting on her radiance and newfound energy. "Wow, Em, you look amazing," her friend Sarah exclaimed one Saturday afternoon as they shared a coffee at a local cafe. "What's your secret?" Emily smiled, a genuine smile that reached her eyes. "I guess I've just decided to focus on me for a change. Feels liberating." She felt lighter, not just physically but emotionally. Each day was a step toward healing, a reminder that she deserved love and respect, starting with herself. While Emily flourished, Ethan was left to wallow in his misery. He watched her from a distance, often finding himself at the same cafe or gym, unable to resist the pull of her presence. She was glowing, vibrant, and he felt like a shadow of his former self. His friends had noticed his change too, their playful jabs turning into concerned inquiries. "Ethan, man, you've been moping around. What's going on?" David, one of his closest friends, asked one evening. They were out for drinks, and Ethan stared into his glass, swirling the amber liquid. "Nothing," Ethan replied, his voice flat. "Just thinking, or missing someone," David pressed, raising an eyebrow. Ethan clenched his jaw, unwilling to admit the truth. "It's complicated." "Complicated? You mean you're still hung up on that bet? Dude, you've got to move on. There are plenty of fish in the sea," David said. But Ethan felt a surge of anger. "No, you don't understand," Ethan snapped. "It's not about the bet anymore. I messed up, and I need to fix it." David looked at him, surprise flickering in his eyes. "Fix it? How?" "You hurt her, man. You can't just snap your fingers and make everything better." "I know that," Ethan exclaimed, feeling the frustration bubbling up. "But I can't just give up on her. I love her, and I need to show her that I've changed." The admission hung heavily in the air, and David's expression softened. "Okay, then what's your plan?" Ethan sighed, the weight of his realization settling in. "I don't know yet, but I have to do something, anything, to show her I'm serious. I can't let her go without a fight." With newfound determination, Ethan began to formulate a plan. He needed to change, not just for Emily but for himself as well. The realization of his arrogance had opened his eyes to the superficiality of his previous life. He wanted to be better, to make a difference. He started volunteering at local charities, engaging in community service, and advocating for body positivity. Each act was a step toward redemption, a way to prove to Emily and to himself that he was capable of change. As the weeks passed, Ethan's heart ached with longing. He would see Emily laughing with friends, her spirit unbroken, and it only intensified his resolve. He began to understand that love was not just about attraction or superficial standards. It was about acceptance, kindness, and genuine connection. Emily had taught him that, and he was determined to make her see that he was capable of loving her for who she truly was. But would it be enough? Would she ever trust him again after the pain he had caused? Questions swirled in his mind as he watched her from afar, his heart heavy with regret and hope intertwined. Ethan knew the road ahead would be challenging, but he was ready to fight for her, to prove that true love transcended all boundaries, including those set by society. All he needed was a chance. Ethan Carter stood at the entrance of the community center, his heart racing as he adjusted the collar of his crisp white shirt. It had been weeks since he had last seen Emily Parker, and the thought of her filled him with a mix of excitement and anxiety. The large banner hanging above him read, "Annual Charity Gala for Body Positivity." It was here, amidst the bustling crowd of supporters and activists, that he hoped to prove his transformation. A transformation that he believed was fueled by love. He had thrown himself into the cause, participating in workshops, volunteering at local shelters, and even speaking at events to promote body positivity. Each step he took was a deliberate attempt to shed the arrogant shell he had built around himself, the one that had blinded him to the true beauty that existed beyond the superficial. He had traded boardrooms for community kitchens and designer suits for casual attire, and it felt liberating. "Ethan, you made it," a voice called out, interrupting his thoughts. It was Samantha, one of the organizers of the event, her enthusiasm infectious as she clasped his arm. "I wouldn't miss it for the world," he replied, forcing a smile. "How's the setup going?" "Going great. We have an incredible lineup tonight, and the energy is electric," she beamed. "You should mingle, network. There are some amazing people here." Ethan nodded, but his gaze drifted toward the crowd, searching for a glimpse of Emily. He had learned through mutual friends that she would be attending, and the thought both thrilled and terrified him. Would she see the changes he had made? Would she even want to talk to him? As the evening progressed, Ethan found himself engaging with various guests, sharing his newfound passion for the cause. "It's about more than just acceptance," he explained to a group of attendees. "It's about fostering a community that uplifts everyone, regardless of their size or appearance." I've learned so much about myself in this process. Yet, in the back of his mind, the anxiety remained. He noticed couples laughing, friends supporting one another, and families celebrating their differences. Each scene reminded him of the warmth he had felt when he was with Emily. He couldn't shake the feeling that he had a long way to go to earn her trust back. Finally, he caught sight of her. Emily stood near a table, her hands clasped around a steaming cup of coffee, her curly hair framing her face beautifully. She wore a simple navy dress that accentuated her curves, and her smile lit up the dimly lit room. For a moment, Ethan felt frozen, a mixture of admiration and guilt flooding through him. He took a deep breath and made his way over to her. "Emily," he said softly, his voice barely above the chatter around them. She turned, surprise evident on her face. "Ethan, I didn't expect to see you here." "I know," he replied, trying to keep his tone light. "I've been trying to do more for the community, and I thought this would be a good start." "That's great," she said cautiously, her eyes studying him. "I've heard about your involvement. It's nice to see." "Can we talk?" he asked, his heart pounding. "Just for a minute?" Emily hesitated, her expression guarded. "I'm here to support the cause. I'm not sure this is the right time." "I understand," he said quickly, "but I need you to know that I'm serious about changing. I want to show you that I'm not the same person I was before." She took a sip of her coffee, contemplating his words. "Change takes time, Ethan. I can't just forget everything that happened." "I'm not asking you to forget," he replied earnestly. "I just want a chance to prove it to you. I've been learning and growing every day since things ended between us." Emily's gaze softened slightly, but skepticism lingered in her eyes. "And how do I know this isn't just a phase? That you're not doing this for show? Because it's not about you or anyone else. It's about me wanting to be better. I want to be someone who truly appreciates people for who they are, not just how they look," he said, his voice steady. "You opened my eyes to that," she sighed, conflicted. "It's a nice sentiment, but it's hard to trust someone who has hurt you before." "I know," he admitted. "All I can ask for is time. I'm here to support this cause, and I hope you'll see that it's genuine." Before she could respond, the event organizer took to the stage, capturing the crowd's attention. "Thank you all for being here tonight. We have a special guest who has been a tremendous supporter of our cause. Please welcome Ethan Carter." Ethan felt a wave of panic wash over him. He hadn't prepared for this. As the applause filled the room, he stepped onto the stage, his heart racing. The spotlight felt blinding, and he scanned the audience, landing on Emily's face. She looked surprised, her expression unreadable. Hi everyone," he began, fumbling with his words. "I didn't expect to be up here tonight, but I felt compelled to share a few thoughts." He took a deep breath, channeling his nerves into sincerity. "When I first got involved with this cause, it was because of a bet, a foolish challenge among friends." He paused, letting the truth sink in. "But what I discovered was far more important than any wager. I've learned about the struggles faced by so many individuals who are judged solely on their appearance." He glanced at Emily, whose eyes were fixed on him, a mixture of curiosity and caution evident in her gaze. "I've come to understand that beauty is not defined by societal standards. It's about kindness, intelligence, resilience, and love." He felt his heart pounding, the weight of his words pressing heavily on him. "And I want to be a part of that change." The crowd erupted into applause, but Ethan's gaze remained locked on Emily. "Most importantly, I want to apologize. I've hurt someone who didn't deserve it, and I realize now how wrong I was. Emily, you showed me what true beauty is, and I am profoundly sorry for the way I treated you." He felt a lump in his throat as he continued. "I'm here tonight not just as a supporter, but as someone who has been deeply touched by this journey. I want you to know that I love you, Emily. I love you for who you are, inside and out, and I hope you can find it in your heart to give me another chance." The room fell silent, the weight of his confession hanging in the air. Ethan's heart raced as he searched Emily's face for a reaction, her expression a mix of surprise and contemplation. The applause faded, leaving only the sound of his heartbeat echoing in his ears. He had laid everything on the line, bearing his soul in front of everyone. But would it be enough? As the silence stretched, Ethan felt a flicker of hope. He had opened his heart, and now it was up to Emily to decide if she would meet him halfway. Ethan Carter stood in the center of the bustling cafe, a swirl of emotions churning within him. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the chatter of patrons, but he barely registered the ambience. His mind raced back to the recent events that had unfolded in his life, the challenges that had brought him to this moment. He had been so focused on the superficial aspects of relationships, on the facade of beauty that society dictated, that he had almost lost the one person who had genuinely touched his heart, Emily Parker. Just a week ago, everything had seemed lost. Emily had turned away from him, her eyes filled with hurt and betrayal after discovering the truth about the bet. The weight of his arrogance had settled heavily on his shoulders, and for the first time, he felt the sharp sting of regret. But everything began to shift when Ethan stumbled upon a conversation among his friends, a revelation that would change the course of his life once more. As Ethan sat in a corner booth, nursing a cup of black coffee, He overheard snippets of a conversation that made his blood run cold. "Did you hear about the deal? If Ethan marries that girl, the business is as good as mine," one of his so-called friends said, a sneer evident in his voice. Ethan's heart raced as he listened intently, his fingers tightening around the ceramic mug. "Yeah, he's too blinded by his ego to see it. We'll just watch the whole thing implode," another voice chimed in, laced with malice. Ethan's mind raced. Was it possible that someone he considered a friend had orchestrated this entire charade? A wave of nausea washed over him as he pieced together the intentions behind the bet. The realization hit him like a slap to the face. His friend had been sabotaging him all along, using the bet as a pawn in a cruel game to undermine Ethan's success. With a newfound determination, Ethan rose from his seat, the clatter of his chair echoing through the cafe. He had to confront this betrayal, not just for himself but for Emily, who had been caught in the crossfire of his arrogance and his friend's scheming. Ethan stormed out of the cafe and headed straight for his friend's office, the adrenaline coursing through him fueling his steps. The sleek, modern building loomed ahead, a stark contrast to the turmoil brewing inside him. He marched through the lobby, ignoring the surprised glances of passers-by, and reached the office where his friend, Jake, was lounging in a leather chair, scrolling through his phone. "Ethan, what's up, man?" Jake greeted with a casual wave, but his facade crumbled as he noticed the storm brewing in Ethan's eyes. "You think this is a game?" Ethan's voice was low, simmering with anger. "You've been plotting against me, haven't you?" Jake leaned back, feigning innocence. "What are you talking about? We're just having a little fun, that's all." "Fun?" Ethan spat, his fists clenching at his sides. "You've been trying to sabotage my relationship with Emily for your own gain. I heard you talking in the cafe. You want to take over my business, don't you?" The room fell silent as the weight of Ethan's words hung in the air. Jake's expression shifted from casual amusement to one of defensive annoyance. "Come on, Ethan. You know how it is in business. It's cutthroat. You can't let a girl get in the way of what you've built." Ethan's heart raced, a mix of outrage and disbelief coursing through him. Emily is not just some distraction. She's a wonderful person who deserves better than your games. You're out of line and you're out of my life. I'm done with you. With those words, Ethan turned on his heel and stormed out, leaving Jake's incredulous expression behind him. The confrontation had been empowering, but it wasn't enough. He needed to make things right with Emily. She had to know the truth about everything, the bet, the manipulation, and how deeply he cared for her. Later that evening, Ethan found himself standing outside Emily's apartment, his heart pounding in his chest. The evening air was crisp, and the soft glow of her window illuminated the darkness around him. He took a deep breath, steeling himself for what he needed to say. With a tentative knock, he waited, each second stretching into an eternity until the door finally creaked open. Emily stood before him, her expression a mix of surprise and guardedness. She wore an oversized sweater that hung loosely around her frame, her hair falling in soft waves over her shoulders. "Ethan," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Can I come in?" he asked, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside. Emily hesitated but eventually stepped aside, allowing him to enter. The room was filled with a warm, inviting atmosphere, but the tension between them was palpable. "I heard some things today," Ethan began, his voice earnest. "Things about the bet, about my so-called friends." He searched her eyes for understanding. "I want to apologize for everything. I was wrong to accept that challenge and to put you through that." Emily crossed her arms, her expression still guarded. "You're just saying that because you got caught, Ethan. How do I know this isn't just another ploy?" Ethan felt a pang of desperation. "I know I messed up, but this isn't a game for me anymore. I care about you, Emily. I've seen what I was blind to before. You're beautiful, kind, and intelligent. I've fallen for you in a way I never thought possible." Her gaze softened slightly, but doubt still lingered in her eyes. "But what about your friends? What if they try to come between us again?" "I won't let them," Ethan vowed, stepping closer. "I've already cut ties with anyone who doesn't respect you. who doesn't see how incredible you are. You deserve someone who will fight for you, and that's what I want to do." Emily's walls began to crumble as she processed his words. "You really mean that?" "More than anything," he replied, his voice steady and full of conviction. As silence enveloped them, Ethan took a cautious step forward, closing the distance between them. "I know I have a lot to prove, but I want to show you that I've changed. You've changed me." Emily's expression softened further, and for the first time in weeks, a flicker of hope ignited in her heart. "I want to believe you, Ethan. I really do." "Then let me show you," he urged, his heart racing as he reached for her hand. "Give me a chance to prove it." In that moment, the weight of their past began to lift. Emily felt the warmth of his hand enveloping hers, and as she looked into his eyes, she saw sincerity and love reflected back at her. It was as if the universe conspired to bring them together again, to heal the wounds that had threatened to tear them apart. With tears glistening in her eyes, Emily nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. "Okay." Ethan pulled her into a gentle embrace, their hearts beating in sync as they held onto each other tightly. In that moment, they both understood that true beauty lay not in external appearances but in the love and acceptance they had found within each other. A future filled with hope, love, and acceptance awaited them, and they were ready to embrace it together. If you like the content, don't forget to leave a like, a comment, and share it with your friends. Your comment is essential for the growth of the channel. And look at this video that appears on the screen. See you soon.